Again? Trying again. Well, that seems to have worked. All set. So I've called the meeting to order. I actually think I need a motion to do these things out of order. So can I have a motion to do school first and the department second, please? Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. As I was saying, started to say earlier, we used this approach last year where the first couple of meetings are sessions for the school, in this case, the town manager, the finance director, and the department heads to go through the budget from council, ask questions, etc. Then there are 2 public hearings next week. Is that right, Laurel? Or is it next week or the following week? Okay. And if you recall, last year, I believe we did an additional work session for the council. 3rd and 4th of next week, yes. But if I recall correctly, last year we did a work session, so that we scheduled. So to the extent that members of the council would like that, I know for me, particularly the first night, I really have not had a chance to go through this thing with anything resembling the kind of attention it deserves. So sometimes that necessitates having an additional meeting. So why don't we start with you, Bob, and get underway? Oh, do you want to start? Okay. Yes.
Just so you know, we do have another meeting scheduled on the 10th as a final public hearing. We can vote on the budget.
Terrific.
So that gives you the
Wonderful.
opportunity to factor that in.
Great.
As you know, by charter, I'm required to present the town manager's recommended fiscal 25 operating and long-term capital budget. I'd like to briefly go over some highlights from the budget, and then we'll get into the first one instead, the different departments over the next couple of nights, followed by 2 public hearings and possibly a 3rd one that's scheduled if necessary. First item that this budget primarily focus on is competitive salaries for employees to ensure that employees here receive a competitive wage. As you all know, investing in the workforce will attract and retain talented and dedicated individuals to our community. Keep in mind that we are still under contract negotiations with the union on the salaries. For the updates will be provided once as negotiations evolve. Also included in this budget is the expansion of 2 positions in particular. One is expansion of the hours of the zoning administrative assistant and the adult service library. Both of these were requested by the particular department head to increase these positions. Zoning, the administrative assistant will now become full-time. The library has a new adult service librarian instead of the cataloged position they had, and that will be increasing by 35 hours. Also, the library will be opening on Sundays during the winter months. I guess this is something they did pre-COVID. Also included in this budget is the funding for a public safety communication coordinator. We have been discussing this probably on and off for the last 2 years. This position will work very closely in transition with Howell Koenig. As we all know, he has volunteered for decades and has coordinated all the communication radios for the town. This includes a number of departments. It includes public safety, it includes fire, it includes rescue, it includes sewer, water, school, and other agencies. And as a community, we've been extremely fortunate that Howell has volunteered so many years for this, and now we must plan to hire someone to work closely with Howell as we begin that transition over the next couple of years. Also in fiscal 24, the human service position, director's position, if you remember, we budgeted 50% of that last year. The other 50% is budgeting this year. And also we'll see some expansion on that budget. As you know, the human service director has worked very hard in the past year to start addressing some of the needs of our residents, both seniors and others. Some of the initiatives includes Meals on Wheels, ride share, support for seniors, and also included, especially the ride share has expanded to individuals with disabilities and those caring for the elderly. As you know, with the recent fire at the Harborside, we've learned a lot from that fire. One of the things that is included in this year's budget is $350,000 of capital in what I call the operating capital, to purchase a high-velocity portable saltwater pump, which the volunteers at the fire department has identified as a need. We are budgeting 50% of this particular piece of equipment in fiscal 25. The remainder will be budgeted in fiscal 26. Finally, debt service. This year, the debt service, if everyone's remembered, we completed the broadband project, which we started a couple of years ago. This year's budget includes a significant increase in debt service, specifically for the taken on that particular debt of broadband. Just so the council know, we did fund that over a 10-year period of time. That issue was for 10 years. Finally, in conclusion, I really want to emphasize that this budget, that's before you, has a total increase of $2,838,961. This is a significant increase for this community. It represents 13.3% increase over previous fiscal years. While I think this increase is significant, I think it's crucial that we recognize that it's a necessary step for the pressing growth that we've seen in this community firsthand. I also want to highlight that this budget, and the council should be somewhat familiar with this, those that have been on the council for 3 to 4 years now, and those that have been on longer, that it does exceed the cap. Under Rhode Island general laws, we can only increase our budget levy 4%. This does exceed that. We will need to request an override from the state. In order to submit this override, first we need a 4/5 affirmative vote from the town council. We then submit it to the state. And then also when we get to the financial town meeting, it has to be approved by a simple majority of those attending the financial town meeting. We'll get more into this cap and the revenue portion of the budget. Amy has a lot of data and information about this override that will support what we were trying to do. In summary, the proposed budget for the proposed fiscal budget will address the needs of the community with a comprehensive approach. As always, I would like to thank the department head and also the community service agencies for their efforts in working with myself and Amy and themselves among the group to present a budget that will provide the level of services that the town requires given its growth in recent years. That is my opening statement, and I will now turn it over to the school.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to present the New Shoreham School Department fiscal year 25 budget request. Tonight, we brought a budget book to provide more detailed information about our budget process and the final request. Of course, we always like to celebrate our students' success and our successes in the school. So the first page really focuses on some very important positive New Shoreham School District accomplishments and news. In the area of athletics and academic accomplishments, our new principal, Dan Warner, is the chair of the Rhode Island Interscholastic League Principals Committee, and under his leadership, RIL is the first state high school association in the country to have 100% of its members earn the status of National Federation of State High School Associations honor roll by having all schools participate in online coaches education courses. Dan is also working collaboratively with our staff to develop a new schedule that will include seminar courses that will allow students more opportunities at face-to-face classes for more challenging advanced placement courses in math and science. In the area of competitive grants, last year, our athletic director wrote approximately 6 grants that totaled about $30,000. And at the beginning of this year, he actually was awarded another $20,000 in grant funding to help improve our athletic program. Town Manager Crawford and the school department worked closely on Governor McKee's Learn 365 grant to bring $50,000 worth of educational programming outside of the school day. And those programs have included a Crazy Eights elementary math program, an SAT, PSAT prep program, an after-school homework club, a family literacy night that was really exceptional. It's also funded resources like a family literacy backpack for summer to prevent summer regression. So it's very innovative work, and we work collaboratively, the town and the schools, to get that. Lastly, the school building committee recommended the administration write a Learning Inside Out grant for $100,000, which we were also awarded, and that grant will allow us to build an outdoor classroom. In the area of rigorous professional development, under the Rhode Island Right to Read Act, our school district was required to have, all school districts in Rhode Island were required to have all professional staff certified in the science of reading and structured literacy by fiscal year 25. The Block Island School achieved this goal a year early. This year, we have focused our professional development on differentiated instruction to meet the needs of all learners. And this year, our STAR accountability rating went up from a level 2 to a level 3 STAR accountability rating. And that's in large part due to our increase in students participating in online advanced or placement courses. So I just want you to know that last year's investment in education paid off. Things are improving, the schools are on a positive trend, and we're very excited about that. On the next page, and I'll bring you through each one of these items, you'll see our budgeting process and the results. The process is the same as it's always been. The school committee went through the traditional process of having multiple budget workshops, receiving input from the school improvement team, the administration and staff. Some of the challenges included a significant decrease of 44% in state aid based on several factors that we've talked about last year and at other meetings. You know, factors like the core instruction calculation, which is based on enrollment, the student success factor based on families receiving benefits, and the state share ratio, which is affected by high poverty values.
So this percentage number is for what time period?
So last year, our state revenue went down. This year, it went down another 44% for this upcoming budget.
But it's based on the previous year?
Yes, on past years, yeah, data. Yep. So the resulting request that you have before you is that we initially received requests from all constituents reflecting a 6% increase in local appropriations. The school committee held and debated many of these requests, and they even eliminated their own school committee stipends. That's how committed they were to balancing or at least bringing the budget down. The budget we're presenting for fiscal year 25 is $5,912,441, which brings the local appropriation request down to a 4% increase at $221,421. This budget includes requests for additional staffing in the area of administration, teaching staff, and maintenance supervisor. This budget also decreases staff levels last year at the superintendent level and eliminating one teacher's aide. So the school committee really worked at making sure that they were responsible about the positions and decreasing some, even though they increased some. On page 2 and 3, you'll see revenue and reserves. In the entitlement grant revenue, we identify the federal grant revenues, which show that we are using alternative funding as intended as a supplemental resource for some very important training, supplies, and staffing. In the fund balance and capital reserves, we continue to show prudence in our spending annually, allowing us to maintain a healthy balance should we have any unanticipated needs. On page 4, you'll see the expenditures by department. In the chart, you see a large decrease in student support and superintendent's office. The student support decrease is a result of our changing our transportation staffing from an employee staff to contracted services. So you're still paying for the service, it's just in a different pot of money.
Yep.
The superintendent's office is a result of decreasing the number of days required for the superintendent's position. And then in the chart, you will see a 9% increase in athletics. And that athletics also incorporates extracurricular clubs. So it's not just athletic increases in coaching costs, but also some extracurricular clubs like the drama club,
Mhm.
which was new this year, but we have high participation. So it's something that you want to encourage students. In the chart, there's a 6% increase in grades 8 through 12 services, and that increase is a direct result of the expenses within the 8 to 12th grade category. And in the science position, substance abuse counselor and scholarships, those are all areas that increased. But the substance abuse counselor has been funded for 2 years, 100% through a RISIS grant, but this year it cuts back to 50%. So that's, we see a value in that position. But the grant's starting to run out. On pages 5, 6, and 7.
Shocked by that.
Yeah, that's how a lot of the grants work. On page 5, 6, and 7. Yes.
Yeah, right.
On page 5, 6, and 7, there's more information about expenses. And the pie chart on 5 shows the expenditure by department. As you can see, salaries and benefits, we're currently, as town manager mentioned, we're currently negotiating with the AFSCME, both AFSCME and with our NSTA. So that does not give us a fixed expense at this time for salaries and benefits. This year, in addition, some years we come to you with a lot of retirements, which helps us in some ways. This year, we had no retirements that would create the additional expense in severance and OPEB, so that's good.
Mhm.
But usually would also reduce salaries, so
Right.
something to consider. In building operations, the Block Island School is a building that has older sections and needs additional care and upkeep. As a result of the volume of work needed, this budget includes a new position of maintenance supervisor. Under technology, we continue to leverage our partnership with North Kingstown, and it's been a very frugal solution to providing the best and most current technology we can afford. We continue to upgrade the infrastructure and support all classrooms with appropriate levels of technology. There is very little change in expenditures between fiscal year 24 and 25 in technology. And to be honest, with the addition of broadband, it actually helped us reduce some costs. So that's
Sure.
positive.
Yeah.
In insurance, this is the last year of a 4-year phase-in of property value to our insurance rates, but we're still waiting on the final rates and we're hopeful. Under food service, we have continued to use a contracted food service program. Their expertise helps us to meet FDA, USDA, and RIDE requirements, which allows us to maximize our state and federal reimbursements and grants. And in the expenditure by type, the pie chart is really great at visually explaining that all school systems are labor intensive. 84% of the budget is in salaries and benefits. But that's not uncommon in systems across the country, honestly. It's just the reality that we're a people-focused business. We focus on children and we need staff to do it. When supplies and capital only make up about 4.5% of the budget, there are very few areas to trim the budget without some repercussions to the quality of the programs being offered. On page 8, which is the last page, you'll see a summary of our requests and the results. The chart identifies the areas of investment in the school program. It's important to note, and I mentioned it earlier, that the increase in the administrative position at the top of the chart is offset a little bit by a decrease in the superintendent's position. The math teacher and interventionist position has been revised as they're working on scheduling because we see a need for the high level sciences as well. So we talked about, needing physics and chemistry, but hopefully this is going to help us do that on a better, not on an online way.
So Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yep.
the 0.5 assistant principal, 0.5 special ed, that's envisioned as a person or?
Yeah.
And
One full-time employee.
And on the math teacher, math interventionist, that's envisioned as one person, but could also morph into physics or chem or.
Yeah, so we're already
that.
looking, I mentioned in the beginning that Principal Warner is actually looking at a creative schedule so that we could have seminar classes, and it might end up being like a 0.2 chemistry
I
teacher versus
see.
a specialist, a 0.2,
Gotcha.
trig teacher or whatever.
Yeah,
So we're really working through that because we're working through the scheduling now. So it's probably not one person,
right.
which
Gotcha.
actually saves you in benefits oftentimes too. So that's a little plus.
So can I ask if you're gonna be having a half-time math teacher, a half-time science teacher, 0.2 science teacher, does your existing math and science now become part-time?
No. So we're adding these, because what's happened is, and I mentioned in the beginning, we did increase AB classes online. And that works for a percentage of students, but not all students. So now what we're going to do is not pay the online subscription for students to take chemistry online. But we're going to hire, where this is that definitely not a 1.0. We're going to hire, we're looking at creating a creative schedule to hire a 0.2 chemistry teacher, to hire a 0.2 physics teacher. So we're looking at it creatively. It's equals one position, but it's going to be, I think, small positions.
So they would basically teach the AP course.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Understand.
Right now, our science teacher, our old science teacher could teach all the subjects. But new science teachers coming in don't teach biology, chemistry,
Right.
earth science, if you think back when.
You're a chem teacher or a physics
Right.
teacher, yeah.
So our 10th graders are taking chemistry online. Chemistry is a really good example because a lot of parents are upset about that. Their kids are taking chemistry online, where chemistry is a really hands-on subject. We're doing well in it, but it would be nice to have a chemistry teacher, but there's not enough time in the day for one teacher to teach all those subjects. Same thing with math, trigonometry, algebra, geometry. You can't do it.
That's a really interesting approach.
So we've been doing it online, but we're getting lower star ratings, and everything else, because kids aren't reaching out and taking trigonometry, for example. They're just taking what's there, so
Right.
this would be able to bring in higher level classes, but where there's definitely a need, but it doesn't take away from, the teacher teaching 8th grade, and the teachers 9th, 10th, whatever, so.
That's an interesting approach.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Bob.
No, that's right. It's a good creative, and that was a good explanation. Okay, keep going. All right, I actually already discussed the student assistance counselor, how that increases the district share 50% of the salary. And originally it was fully funded for the first 2 years.
Does that person also have another role at the school?
No,
No, just,
yeah, they work for RISUS. They only come out 2 days a week, which is a 0.4. But we appreciated that service.
oh yeah, no, I was
social,
just
emotional,
curious about
yeah.
whether this was, someone with a dual role. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Then you'll, what,
2 days a week is a
0.4.
0.4? What's-
Yeah, 40%. 5 days a week,
Okay,
two days a week is
It's
40.
40%. So,
I wasn't paying attention to that.
that's why we need those math.
Because you took it online.
David Lewis, do you remember the name of that god awful online math program we had?
Can't even begin to remember it. It's a good close, and I work with the technology.
It was hard with the tin cans and the string.
The advocates.
Program.
X plus Y.
I hate that still goes back to my high school days.
So, some more of these are really focused on positioning ourselves well and positioning our staff and providing them with support. So the next one is for our multi-language learners. It's increasing the tuition that we would be paying for our current teachers to get MLL certified through a partnership
understand.
with
Gotcha.
Roger Williams University. And we had one teacher already go through it, so we know it's an excellent program and it'll provide better services for a very important population in our school. We talked about the maintenance supervisor. As you know, we could certainly use the help. Not that we don't appreciate everything the town does for us, because they do a lot. But it would just, I think, be that much more helpful in dealing with an older building. The 2 mentor stipends, those are RIDE required mentor and induction programming. So it's something that we really feel important that we should add that into the budget this year. The cross-country cross-country has been a new sport, which I'm a big fan of. And we had a coach volunteer who's been awesome, but you just never know if, sometimes things change and you should have that in the budget.
You're not going to
Gonna
hear
offer
anything bad about cross-country on this side.
All my kids ran cross-country, so.
And just on the record, I didn't ask for salary.
You chose not to, and we appreciate it, but you just never know. It's always good to have it in the budget just in case.
Well, so on that topic too, I want to go back to, I know it seems like such a generous thing to do to have the school committee waive their salaries. I think it sets a very bad precedent. Because when we come to an election, somebody who might be thinking about running for school committee, if you have to hire babysitters to watch your kids while you go to meetings, you're at a loss. When anybody who's served on a committee or a board knows you're already at a loss when you do that. Like you're already losing time at work, you're already, creating situations where you can't be at home. I think it's a very bad idea.
Well,
I make a very small amount of money for this job, and I am grateful for every penny of it, because I make about 32 cents an hour for what I put into this. And I think it's a bad idea. I'm sure you guys all voted on it, but I think you should reconsider that.
It's also, how much money are we talking about? It's not very much, is it?
$7,000.
It's very,
Ours is, the totals are on 2,000.
ours traditionally was 2,000.
With 5 members.
Yeah.
I thought it was less than 7.
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry,
surprised
I
we
thought I
should.
saw 7 somewhere. So, anyway, my opinion on that.
it was very gracious of you. Thank you.
Very much to do, but it could prevent somebody else from running. So, anyway, go ahead.
All right, I've already mentioned drama club. We have high participation this year, so it's very exciting because as we know, athletics and extracurricular activities get kids excited about coming to school. And then we trick them into liking to learn too, which is a good thing. Because we know that leadership and the team building and all the things that we get from different activities are really important to children's development. The detention monitor is a new position. We have been focusing on our high rate of absenteeism. The school committee has really done a lot of work going back to last summer. And we are seeing gains. We actually have better attendance this year than we did last year. So, we want to keep that up. So that's why we included a detention monitor. The textbooks for the new science curriculum, again, is a RIDE requirement. They're expecting us to change and we got to keep up with the times, and science is an important discipline. IXL software is software that supports our students in math and ELA learning. But it's really a great program that helps kids to learn and keep track of where their skills are at so that they can stay on task and develop. Power School special education software was requested by our special ed director of student services, our principal, and our staff. We had it in the past and we switched all of our student information systems over to another program. What they're recommending is not to do a wholesale switch because that's a lot. And also it's just this particular software that really would benefit that program. So that's why we put that in the budget. Student assemblies for motivational and educational speakers. That's not uncommon in most school district budgets. And then students, this is a neat one too. Students teacher major scholarship was put in, designed to encourage Block Island school graduates to get a degree in teaching and then return to Block Island to be resident teachers. Because we really feel we need to grow within too. And we need to encourage our students to go into education, but then come back and give to their community. So that's why these things were added to the budget. The chart at the bottom will show you the star rating. And there are some things that we rank as a 5-star school. Our goal is to get all of those categories up to a 5-star. And so, an investment in the Block Island School will yield increases in student and staff accountability and performance. And that's why we put forward a budget of 4%. Attached to this budget book, we also added for you the line item budget. And so if you would like to look through the line item budget, you can see the increases and decreases, and you could, between Melanie and I think we can answer the questions that you would have on any of those line items if you would like to ask any questions.
There was one thing I saw in our report, and I'm not sure how this even works with the school, the percentage of the retirement that's funded,
So OPEB or?
I don't even know.
Yeah, so we, actually, it's in here and, our OPEB requirement, we actually, so 52,202 and 50, is the future benefits. We actually have had less staff taking health benefits.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't word that properly.
She's
Maybe it's
asking
looking
how
for
much
the-
is the pension funded, and Amy's looking it up right now, unless Melanie, you know, of that. I wouldn't think you, I wouldn't expect you to know that.
I only know ours because I read it.
Yeah. we
Yeah.
have it in,
He's
yeah.
showing off.
Um,
It was 92%.
Yeah, Amy's looking it up, so why don't we just go? with
It
that?
is, our OPEB
We're not
trust
talking about OPEB, we're
Oh.
talking about how much
Sorry.
is our pension funded, like.
pension, okay, got it.
Amy has put in here.
Yeah.
What our pension, so Amy's looking it up.
Okay,
I think for the teachers, they don't break it out by community.
That's what I-
Because
I
the
would-
teacher system is aggregated, so
Right.
it doesn't have the same detail. So,
But it's just stated how much. We have to look, when we can come back.
Yeah, it's not. If we don't, if that complicated, it's not.
yeah, they're all.
I mean, you don't have to get it right now.
You're not talking about
Our
what
OPEB.
percentage of the OPEB trust is funded.
No, they talk about the other pension.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. Well, so, if you have any questions, you can see some of the, right off the bat, you can see the decrease in state revenue.
I mean, that's, I was.
That's the
gonna say,
toughie.
Sort of the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Is that, it's just, I'm having a hard time to come up with an adjective to describe it.
Well, and I know
For what it's worth, everybody I've been to Providence a few times and, I'm wondering, and we should talk to Tina Spears and Alana, to Mario and, et cetera, because there's a point at which this number stands out so much. It's almost embarrassing if you're a state person. I mean, really,
Yep.
I mean, at what point do you say, keep it? And release us, because there's several thousands of dollars worth of upgrades that are required by the state, and meanwhile they're reducing funding, by whatever $80,000. I mean, it's
It's already, if you look at the chart of all the schools.
Yeah.
I mean, it's millions of
Yes.
dollars, and then it's like 80,000 for Block Island.
yeah, yeah.
And now it's, even less.
So there was a collection of towns that were going to lobby to change the whole formula. Are we on board with that?
So, I mean, I would
Yeah,
abs-
sure,
I would,
different
I would
reasons.
absolutely be on board that. What we've been told by our legislators, our lobbyists, I actually was fortunate enough to get together with the speaker, in the last few weeks, is the likelihood of a major shift in the funding formula is pretty remote. You know what I mean? It's like, you want to talk about a system that, it's a push me, pull you, where you pull one thread here and 60 other threads go. But that doesn't mean that there can't be, for example, a component of the formula or a new program that establishes a minimum that a school district would receive, which is what they've suggested is probably the most fruitful lobbying approach. Basically, whether that's a hold harmless when you get to a certain level or a you know, there's no school district that's gonna get less than 300 grand or, you know, something like that, you know. I
Yeah,
mean to answer your
I mean,
questions.
given the fact that this has been going on forever, and we've always been at the bottom, ridiculously at the bottom.
Yeah,
And there is supposedly a minimum, but the minimum is lower every year. I think it's a, rather than try to, because we restructured, they've done lots of restructuring in the state. I mean, I remember years and years ago, it was we did say at that point, just keep your money, and they didn't go through with it in the end anyhow. Oh, I shouldn't start, I don't have the sign. The, on approach Keith just referenced of a minimum that was at least, if not substantial, not insulting, was probably the best.
I think that's right.
So question on the bottom of page one. I'm sure it's rolled up in some of the stuff you've already covered. Student assistance wasn't budgeted. Now it's showing the 36. So is that's the what?
Was the grant lady, right? We used to get a grant and now the grant's been up 50%.
Okay.
And that also adds in something else is in that line.
This, the scholarships for students. to
Okay.
go,
I figured it was
back.
there somewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
That's in that student assistance line.
Yeah.
We, excuse me, the dental, are you guys still changing the dental program from the way it has been in the past? The funding seems much lower.
So there's a new dental provider on the island. They're very familiar with the process and what's required by the state. So they're doing it differently, how they do it with their mainland schools, and it's a lot more efficient and a lot less money. In the past, the students went to the medical center and it was a charge per student. Now they're coming directly to us and they're charging hourly. It's a lot less.
Right? And it says, renting land and buildings. Sorry. So what land and buildings are we renting?
We rent a house to house our administrators.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you.
You have a house now?
Yes, we do. Oh, wait.
But
Yes,
it's
we
still-
rent one for the, yep, we do.
Oh. I thought you lost me, but I'm probably a year behind.
We switched this year to a new rent.
This isn't apropos of any line item, but I just wanted to say to you guys, I think we've all heard loud and clear. We know housing is an issue throughout the island, but this housing for teachers, particularly as you're shifting models in a way that I think is really exciting, is very much on our radar screen because I think it's vital to the ongoing improvement that you're working on. I don't know if improvement's the right word, but you know, the evolution maybe is fairer. We're you know, I think we all intend to work on that with you because I think you're right, it's critical. Particularly frankly, as teachers who have houses retire, you know, I mean, it's like, it's you know, there's and your real estate prices are going up the way that ours have. So for what it's worth, I hear it and we're paying attention to it. What are the things that would move? What are the inputs that move you from 3 to 4, say, for example? How does that all work?
So if you look at that chart on the bottom,
Yeah,
it's,
my eyes are so terrible.
Yeah,
I
and
couldn't
it's small.
read it.
it's very small. One of the areas that we did increase with the Diploma Plus, and we talked about the fact that for other school districts that have a regional vocational school that their kids can attend, then that works for them. We don't have that if our kids can't live here. So if they choose, if a family says, you know what, we really want our kid to go to a vocational school, they move off the island. they're not one of our students.
Right.
So they don't get counted in the Diploma Plus measures. So the only thing we can focus on are like AP classes. They are looking at some other measures that we might be able to excel on. So we're investigating that as well, like the seal of biliteracy. That's something that our very strong MLL coordinator, she really started focusing about a year ago on that. And we already had one student who received the seal of biliteracy. So, because a lot of students can speak two languages, but they can't always write or read those two languages really well.
Mhm.
But we had one last year who was able to get a seal of biliteracy that could reach the standards for both languages. We want to keep it, investing in that because, I mean, let's face it, being bilingual is a wonderful skill to have in this world now. So that's another area where we could move that up further. And actually language, our MLL students, kudos to our staff who do serve them. Their performance was one of the performances that really increased this year.
Mhm.
So that was nice to see. And then, testing on the RICAS and growth. And so, again, we actually did very well this year on testing on the RICAS and growth. Is there room for improvement? Yes, there's 2 more stars worth of improvement we can get to. But that's why it would be great for our students to be able to have access to those high level classes.
And understand, I'm not asking that because I'm sort of obsessed with having stars.
Yeah.
It's at least a guideline for what your future investment is, I was just curious about that.
And the school committee has been great about requesting that information,
Mhm.
figuring out how their decisions will improve our academic performance.
Mhm.
I think that is encouraging. You were at the meeting a year ago and
Yes,
first had that information.
yeah,
And you can see one of those focuses is on absenteeism. And as I said, it's actually, our chronic absentee rate went down by 20% this year.
Good.
Yeah,
Good for you.
so, but it took a lot of work on the school committee setting policy, on the administration and the teachers, setting expectations for students. And just, in the
it's a
school. community.
popular new program.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So, we are working on all those areas to bring them up.
Great. This is very helpful for me. Any other questions? Bob and Molly and Jess?
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Where did I see something about the bleachers on the first couple pages? Here, that's a good point. Page 3. So, I had a question on page 3 about the bleachers. How are those being paid for? Are those being paid
Out of the reserve fund. So,
out of the reserve fund?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not part of the $10 million improvement to the gym and everything else?
No.
Okay.
Yep. And,
We had 2 emergency issues to come out of this year of our reserve fund. One was the bleachers. It was.
Thank
It was
you.
found that, well, anybody who looked at them could
Yeah.
have seen it, but it was actually found that our bleachers were unsafe and we couldn't actually hold events in there. So it was right at the end of our volleyball season. While people were coming to the gym and they were all pushed in, they were not sitting in the bleachers. So we had to do emergency repairs and anyway. It's a process to find somebody you can't just put in bleachers. So we ordered new bleachers, so those will be done.
The plan is the company's gonna come out and remove them in June. And then hopefully we have work being done on the gym over the summer, and then they'll come back in the fall to install.
And then the other thing was the generator. And removing the old generator and all that came out of the emergency. Came out of our reserve fund, our balance.
And that was that 18,272 total or was it more than that?
So a portion of the generator came out of the fiscal year prior. And we did get 40% back from the state, and the town contributed, I believe, 15,000 to it. So some of it was paid out of fiscal year 2022, and then that 18 that you see there was just some remainder. I think it was some electric work hooking it up.
The town paid 16,000.
15,000, I believe.
15, okay. And then you got a reimbursement from the state.
Yep, around 32,000.
So is the generator that you have now a new generator or is it a retrofitted,
It's a new one.
a new one? Okay. Great. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you guys so much. It was very helpful. You guys want to come up? Why not? Everybody. All the department heads. Amy, do you want to go first? Do you want to go first? Please. Would you please go first? How's that? Absolutely. And by the way, I trust your judgment, so. Mike, bring your own chair. We need new bleachers in the town council chambers too. Hey, Paul.
Now, was this one not good? The one that we had-
The other one. It's not true.
Wait, yeah, why would I have two? And then also for
We went
the.
to the number 12, we went to the-
Oh.
Thank you guys for coming.
Instead of- oh,
So we're going to start this part of the meeting with Amy Land.
And so I think the plan for the rest of the evening would be to jump into the expenditure side of the budget with the departments. And then circle back to revenues, which includes taxes, and we'll spend a lot of time on that detail. But first we'll focus on the operating side and start with the administration budget, which is on pages 8 and 9. If you'd like to follow the numbers. And if you prefer to follow words, we're starting on page 8 of the narrative. So. And so looking at administration, the biggest change that you're going to see here is actually the removal of everything related to human services, as that's been carved out into its own department. So we'll talk about human services separately. Overall, you'll see a reduction of the bottom line in administration as we take out wages for the director of human services, the senior coordinator, sort of the incidental supply line related to human services, and move all those to a new department. So that's really the major change. But then we also had a reduction in the line that was introduced in the current year for consultant personnel. And that was, I will say, more budget balancing driven than anything else.
Could you give me a line number, please, Amy?
Let's see, 5409.
Thank you.
So that was in the current year budget at $40,000. We have not expended any of that year to date. We've reduced it to 20,000 for 25. Again, not necessarily because there isn't a need, but because we need to keep things balanced and we haven't implemented a lot in that program so far this year. We did increase the solicitor line from 210,000 in the current year to 225. That's based on where we're trending this year and the expectation that some of those costs will continue into next year. Some of them will start to be relieved, particularly hopefully in the land use zoning area. You know, we've done a lot of work in that space this year. But we think we're going to need a little bit more going into next year.
So Can I just ask, so you're saying that some of that, that's not all like litigation and
No,
this is,
that's going to be your general solicitor services.
okay,
So that's going to be Nick and James, that's going to be your land use attorneys. That's
okay.
going to be a lot of legal work that is not necessarily related to litigation.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. You can see that the line above 5,400 consultant legal litigation has a small amount. We've budgeted 25,000. And last year, that's about what we expended. On occasion, the council will identify certain litigation that they want to track separately, and that allows us to put it in that litigation line and really be more clear about those expenses.
Great.
There are some increases in some of the operational lines related to the clerks. A lot of these are usage and inflation driven when we're talking about
So you mean,
postage.
sorry.
Yep.
So when you do the litigation, does James and attorneys weigh in? Like here's, or do you guys just kind of say, oh, we don't have anything on our radar? But do they give input into, hey, we're seeing a rise in blah, blah, blah in other towns? Or do you just kind of, did you follow my question?
Yeah, this is based on what we have and know today and looking backwards. I haven't asked them to weigh in. We can certainly do that, but
Just,
yeah.
if there's a trend of people suing zoning or whatever, just plan accordingly. Okay, let's look at it.
Yep. We are seeing some, like I said, some operational increases in some of the clerks lines in the middle of the page. And then if you, flip to page 9. There are 2 other increases I wanted to call your attention to. The first is insurance, which is line 6,700. This is going to be your property liability and workers' comp insurance. We've seen pretty material increases over the last few years in those rates, particularly on the property side. The trust has been doing a valuation phase in, meaning they've let us know that they expected those rates to increase as they adjusted valuations. We're in the final year of that. We're also seeing increases in the workers' comp as we see increases in our wages for our staff. That's being reflected in the premiums as well. So based on that history and what we're expecting for next year, there's a $35,000 increase there. And then,
Excuse me, the workers' comp number that's in our budget, does that include everyone?
yes, it's everyone within the town, does not include the school.
Water sewer is what I'm talking
It
about.
does include water sewer, yes.
Thanks.
And then the last item I wanted to call your attention to was line 8,200 deer management, with a recommended level for 25 is $30,000. That's a $5,500 increase from the current year. It is not at the level that we actually expended this year. We had some donations. In the current year, we spent $35,500 and we capped it, meaning there was additional demand beyond that, but those were all the funds available. So know that while there is an increase there, if next season is similar to this one, again, we'll hit a cap on the funding of those deer reimbursements. Marianne, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I just have a question on the legal, is there contractual obligations on the legal structure, so forth? Is there also like a contingency that's built into that for like suits that come up?
So I would answer that by saying that the budget number is not based entirely on the retainer, if you will. Some of our attorneys are paid hourly, not a flat monthly rate. So it's based on our experience and what we expect to have coming forward. It's not fixed enough for us to just use a retainer amount as a basis. Is that Makes
Yeah,
sense.
so obviously the stuff above are contractual, so I'm all contingency.
Yes.
We're responsible for the other things.
Yeah, it's a mixed,
Thank you, Bill.
a combined element.
Go ahead, Amy.
Questions? Do we want to turn the page to finance? Okay. So we're on page 10 of the budget. And, I'm gonna sort of refrain from any comment on the wages unless there's a material change in the staffing program. But otherwise, when you're seeing increases there, those are subject to negotiation. So the other major change in the finance for 25, and we saw this in the clerk's office as well, is an increase in the education and training line. This is an effort in both of those departments and in others throughout the budget to make sure that our staff is getting the development that they're asking for. So we're really trying to support that with this budget and honoring those requests.
Okay, that was.
That was finance on page 10.
I'm going back.
Oh.
I thought I saw something where professional development is zeroed out.
Sure, in the town clerks or administration department on page 8. We did for some time, and it looks like it can be hidden now, have a line called professional development, line 5725. And this was a strategy from a previous town manager to have just a bucket of money that was available at their discretion to support staff interests. We're essentially doing that, but accounting for it in the departments where the staff lives. So again, we're trying to support those initiatives. It's just more department focused.
Can't find it.
Page 8, middle of the
Because I'm on page 9. I knew I saw it before. That's why,
line 5725.
okay, so that's just moved around.
Yes,
That's not something that's been gotten rid of.
no.
But that's all. I'll put the concept. Yeah. But
On page 11, we have human services, and one of the challenges of a new department is that they don't get listed on the agendas. So I believe we're going to talk about human services tomorrow, and the director will be here to discuss that with us.
tomorrow's meeting is at
3
Great.
o'clock.
3. 3 o'clock.
Zoning experts.
Perfect. Did you make it 5?
So on page 12, we have central dispatch. And in general, I would say the program of the dispatch functions is steady and will remain that way. There is some increases in the benefits, and that's just a result of different personnel sitting in the chairs. Sometimes we have a single person, sometimes we have a family, and we honor those obligations regardless of when they might come online. So we do have an increase in the benefit line there, but the real change is the introduction of the public safety communications coordinator.
I can't read that. It's the blue and the green does not.
Oh, it's, yeah.
So, yeah.
Um,
I don't know where it is. 60.
Yeah, and the bottom line is
20,400. Do you want to introduce that, Marianne, or the public safety communications coordinator?
Sure, as I said in my introduction earlier, this evening, we have been talking about this position for some time now. And so it is included in the budget this year, with the understanding that, this person will work closely with Howard Conan and transition. Hopefully we can hire someone mid-fall. We'll see what happens. And so I think this will take over all the emergency communications as it relates to radios. Like I stated earlier this evening, we have a number of radios that a different department use, both fire, rescue, police, highway, school, public sewer, water. And I also think, if I'm not mistaken, the medical center may also.
Yes.
Are sewer and water going to kick in on this?
We can have that discussion.
I mean, I think we should.
I don't think we should have a discussion. I think we should. Yes.
I mean, you know,
That's it. They have to kick in.
um,
If sewer and water kick in, shouldn't fire department kick in separately as well?
Sewer and water enterprise, something separate and apart.
I don't have any problem talking about it, you know, it being a joint effort. So
Right.
fine. I think,
But I mean, the power company also has radios.
I don't know whether they're on the same system.
Thought they
Are they?
were.
Then I think they should kick in too.
I'm just saying it's a
Yeah.
little deeper than what you're thinking it is. It's not so simple as just,
Yeah, I wasn't trying to demonstrate
Sewer
my
and
depth
water.
of thought on it. I was just saying that if it's used across agencies where it's not out of one town pocket into another town pocket, we ought to at least have that conversation.
Yes, is there going to be an appropriate time where it's discussed on the public? Is that the next?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
at next week. Yes, thank you, Bill. Great. The other thing that I think, this will probably come through in public hearing next week, but I think bears describing at least, is that Howell Conant for years has been the only guy who knows how the back of that system works. And at some point, we can't just keep relying on hoping that someone, you know, knows which two wires to connect. Sometimes he even does it remotely. I mean, he's done, I would argue, heroic work on the radio system. Without him, we'd be looking at an even bigger number, I think.
And just to make one note in my report memo to the council, I said decades and Howell corrected me today. That century. He said, he said half a century. And you know what? I have to believe him. I said decades and he said half a century.
That's what volunteer.
Yeah.
And that was all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
How can we graduate in school?
Great.
And
Thank
he
you,
was
Andy.
very-
Discussion about this at some point, Keith.
We can talk about it now. We're on it.
Today's the first day that I've seen this,
Oh, okay.
and I will say that something that affects my dispatch center, my police officers, I mean, my dispatchers are the first key cog
Yes,
in our
absolutely.
public safety system. And I'm really glad that you guys are sitting down with them through the union and trying to help them out, make their wages comparable. Something that affects my dispatch center, something that affects my police officers. I had zero communication that this was happening. I had zero input. I walked in the door and people said, "Have you seen this?"
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say that this is not warranted, because we've been trying to lobby for a while to get Howell some compensation, because he has been doing
Yes,
it
yes.
for free forever. I'm not saying that it's not warranted.
But you've got to
Like I
be in the
said,
loop
I'm
on
just,
this,
I'm,
yes.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm just extremely disappointed
Yeah.
in how this was brought about and the lack of communication.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Like I said, I'm not against it. I think it's needed. Somebody does need to have. You need to have more than one person that has the key to the car.
Yeah.
And
Yes, right.
Matt Moynihan and I had this conversation with the ARMS, our CAD RMS system at the police station. When he first came, Michelle Spiro and I both had it. Michelle left, we went to Freedom Tech, and then I only had it. And he said to me, he goes, "If you get hit by a bus,
Yeah, we got.
you're the only one with the key."
Yeah, right.
And he wasn't wrong. And I
Yeah.
think this is the same thing. We need to have multiple people that can do it. And somebody does need to do it. And like I said, I'm not against the position, because it does need to be made, because we do need someone that can 24/7 pick up the phone and call and say, "This isn't working."
My sense is that after you've raised this, there will be conversations about it and we'll continue to work on it, but heard and understood.
Are you having weekly, or like, do you have weekly or monthly department head meetings at all?
Thank you, Paul. Amy?
With that, why don't we turn to page 13, which is police. And I'll give you a little overview and then turn it over to Paul, if that's okay. You know, the police budget over the last few years has been a work in progress that is new every year. So I will give sort of a stale speech that says this is hopefully a total bucket of funding that supports the operations, but we know the operations a year from now will hopefully look different than they do today as new leadership gets a little more traction and puts their programs in place. So that's something that we talked about in a budget that doesn't look very different than the current year in a lot of line items, but that doesn't mean there's not capacity to make the changes that need to happen going forward. Three caveats. One is, I'm sure that the chief will talk about staffing and the challenges there, but there are two line items that seem to drop precipitously. And that is in the technology and data processing, and then also in the vehicle replacement. That is not meant to represent a lack of need, but we have funding that's left over from prior years that can support technology deployment during fiscal year 25. So we'll draw on those funds first. We will have to continue to support those needs going forward. And then in terms of vehicle maintenance, vehicle replacement, we can adjust the timing and possibly do a lease rather than an outright acquisition, which is what we had funded for. Doesn't mean, again, that we won't replace the vehicles as needed, but we may do some financing strategy in order to make that budget balance appropriately. But, well, what would you add?
And it's, you know, it shows in our budget, in our actual budget from last year, you know, the overtime increase, and it's because we have been having for several years an issue hiring enough police officers to fill positions on a regular basis. So you have to backfill them.
Right,
fill them
yeah.
overtime. We're working hard
Yeah.
to get some people in here. We've got some people in the pipeline
Mhm.
that are gonna help next year.
Right,
It's not gonna help me a whole lot this year.
right. Is the market as tight as it has been for the last few years? Same.
And, you know, part of it's the seasonal officers that we typically hire for the summer. You know, we offer them $45 an hour, which is really good money. We give them a place to stay, they have a room at Seaside, et cetera, et cetera. Departments on the mainland are paying guys retired to sit in a police car on road details, 50 to 65 an hour. So they're looking at coming here, doing and working throughout the
Yeah.
day, and not either standing on the road flagging cars by or something of that nature. So that's kind of what we're up against. And, you know, we've had this discussion before.
Yeah.
My profession as a whole keeps going in this circle of we keep adding more money and trying to attract good quality people to it. And it's really difficult.
Yeah. And what's the answer? I mean, is it to be at $75 an hour? You know, like I'm not sure that we could chase the money on it, you
And
know?
and that ultimately is where we have our issue.
Right.
is you know, again, I wish I had the magic wand to fix that.
Sure.
Did this right from the beginning.
Of course.
My biggest concern was going to be help for the summer.
This is, I think, my fourth budget, and it's been
Mhm.
a conversation at every one is how difficult this is.
So where are you housing them? And will the new Thomas Property Housing be ready for these officers for the summer? Is that where they'll be or?
Most of the summer officers are typically up at Seaside, up above the rooms that we rent from Seaside in Shirley.
And then will the Thomas property be ready for the summer to be occupied?
I'm going to say no, it won't be ready for the summer. Keep in mind that Thomas property, we have an MOA of an agreement as to the hierarchy of who we rent that facility to. It's first rented to police officers, then town employees, then other folks.
It won't be temporary
Yeah.
employees.
Right.
It's-
I guess I'm just going in this angle because I'm wondering whether if you're paying a competitive wage with what they can make for directing traffic on the mainland, it's a lot nicer to be on Block Island. So they might take the job, but if our housing is stinky, that's a factor too, right? So I'm just thinking about the housing, that's all.
It is, and. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about your recent conversations you had with the new recruits coming in and what our salary is for the new recruits, and also the conversation you had with Kevin on the mainland as it relates to the rentals of properties that we will have available, which would probably, which are all positives.
Right.
So I think we need to.
We are, we are looking to recruit 2 new people.
Yes.
One to replace myself and one to start building some of what we need. In conversations that I had with, and a little bit of a long drawn out story. Kevin Barry is a retired lieutenant colonel from the state police. He started a company called Fit to Serve. They do the physical fitness assessment and the written tests. And most of the police departments in the state are now using Kevin's company rather than having 5 guys trained to do the PT assessment. They send the candidate over to Kevin, the candidate pays the fee, you get the results when all the tests are done. Makes it very simple. In conversations that I had with Kevin a couple months ago about how this process works, we had conversations about us beginning to look into the process of hiring new people. So we started talking about wages and other such things. The contract that's about to get signed with the IBPO brings our wages for our officers up to an extremely competitive
Oh, good.
with the mainland.
Great.
And that's, and it was one of the conversations, like I said, I had with Kevin. The other conversation that I had with Kevin was about the Thomas property and the rentals there and what it cost. And at the end of that conversation, Kevin said to me, he goes, when you put out your ad for recruitment, make sure you put that in there.
Oh,
He
interesting.
goes, because that's one of the cheapest rents in Rhode Island.
Oh, great. Right.
So we have a lot of benefits, to bring people here.
That's really helpful. Good to know.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So it's just now, we should with these 2 be able to be good with our year-round officers. Now it's just a matter of trying to fit that niche of getting a couple more here during the summer season to
Right.
to help us out.
Right.
And all of my guys they're calling friends, they're emailing
Sure.
everybody.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
who just retired?
Well,
Who's looking for?
None of this is lack of
we're-
effort. It's just,
because we're,
sort
you
of
know,
fact
we're-
of the marketplace.
Yeah,
It's just,
and it's a big part of it.
right.
Some of the officers that we've had from other summers, just trying to get down to make a first boat in the morning and getting stuck in the beach traffic, getting stuck in beach traffic going home. So there's a lot of those things that for that particular piece of our operation are a little bit difficult for them, so.
Right. I just, it's just very encouraging what you were just, what we were just describing with the Thomas property and the competitive, because it does feel, I think for all of us and not just on this,
Mhm.
we're sort of always chasing, and it's just, good that we, are competitive. I mean, look, that's a significant chunk of this, of the budget increase appropriately is increasing wages where they need to be increased, because we have to continue to keep and attract people who do this important work. So that's really good to hear.
Can I just ask a question? You just talked about them getting stuck in beach traffic. Is that like, do you have guys that come and go in the same day?
Sometimes during the summer, yes, we do.
So like, could they consider flying if that was, or do they still get caught? They probably still get caught in beach traffic. Westerly.
Probably still good, but
Westerly's worse.
but the-
Okay, never mind. Never mind, never mind.
They'd be
I don't
doing a
go-
good
I don't go
job.
to Westerly.
Swamicould.
But that plane's also a whole lot expensive.
Yeah.
Well, I
right.
know, but I just wasn't sure if that
Hmm.
could be an option. I just have another question too, that, it looks like the line for CSOs is level funded.
Mhm.
Where you're asking for level funding. Are you planning on having the same number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And how many is that?
6.
Thanks.
And then where do we stand on discussions with the state on the troopers? Is that locked down? Is
On
that
the,
the state troopers?
oh, yeah, I spoke to the colonel 3 weeks ago. And I put that in a report a little bit ago. That,
Yes.
I had conversations with him. I spoke to Major Allen about 10 days ago, and the officer in charge for the summer has been here previously, which is going to be a big help. And it's Mark Parati, he's a great
Yeah,
guy.
he's a really good guy.
He's a
Yeah.
really good guy. He's going to be very helpful to us.
Yeah.
And as the major said, it's helpful to him too, because he's already been here. He knows the
Yes,
whole program.
right. Yeah, I was really impressed with him. Yeah.
So that is.
Yeah.
Been taken care of.
That's
Memorial
great.
Day through Labor Day as they typically have. And anything that we request over and above that is going to be at the expense of the town, as it has been for the past couple of years.
Right.
And is that what the 10,000 is for Marion? Just above and beyond? Right.
For the state police.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul. This is great stuff.
There's one other item that I just want to touch on under the police benefits. It's in the narrative, but in a different section. Much like we talked about dispatch, as people change, benefit packages change. So we've had some significant increases there. But also we see now the beginning of what's going to be a long-term pressure in the retirement system on police wages. So the police contribution rate, right, was previously about 20%. It was fairly steady. So the town contributes about 20% on behalf of the employees. This year, it went up to about 25%. For 26, fiscal year 26, we know it's going to go up to just under 30%. And so we already know that that's a significant impact this year. We will see a similar impact next year, and that's a squeeze that's going to continue. We have so few contributing officers. There's
Yep.
really nothing to be done about
Right.
it, but
Yeah.
to be aware of it, and it's a pressure that's actually going to get worse, not better,
Yep.
in the short term.
Well, that's uplifting, Amy.
It's my job to tell you whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Just to what Amy's saying, if you have younger guys, that's based on actual, is that correct? Or
Yes, so if we did bring on full-time full-time year-round officers who were contributing members, that does start to offset that if you've got
Right.
incoming and outgoing that match. It's when you have outgoing without incoming
Right.
that you really
Yes. Yes.
have a squeeze.
the point to that is it won't do that all the time. So people are.
All right, Paul, you can't retire. That's.
Wasn't planning on that, unless have those winning numbers. Then we're all leaving.
On pages 14 and 15, we have Public Works. And again, I'll let Mike do most of the talking, except to identify that, again, there are two lines that look like very dramatic decreases. The first is maintenance of the landfill slope, which is line 7426. We do have $66,000 available from a prior year. We were hoping to add to that to be able to do more when the time comes. That's not possible, but we do have some funding available for that. And then
I mean, I don't remember that from last year. What is that? Is that?
sure, that is work that may need to be done at any given time on the revetment. So the stonework that was put in place on the beach below the transfer station. Sometimes, and I don't know if you want to take over, Mike, sometimes a little bit of work can be done. Sometimes you're bringing even just one of those large stones or having to deal with several of them becomes a very expensive project very quickly.
A lot of it is storm related and what type of damage is done to it. It's not horrible right now, but it is indeed some. Down low along the brick wall.
Go ahead.
This has been a bit of a transitional year.
Mike, can you grab a microphone there, please? Thank you.
This has been a bit of a transitional year with me coming over here to town hall and changes over in the highway department. And I think things have gone smoothly now that we're sort of all fallen into our positions and places now. No major changes in here other than what Amy said. There is one thing that one line that will be added to it. It will not change the bottom line, but it's for overtime. And that overtime is that early morning
Beach
Cleanup
cleaning, yeah,
type
right,
thing
yeah.
that just didn't happen to make it in here, but it will. We'll just shift a few things around.
Mike
And
very
that was
clearly
fine.
asked for it and I just didn't put it in.
Yes.
In the past 2 years, it was the Tourism Council and which was very generous, but we can't rely on that all the time. It was time we take over, and we found that there was very much a need for it. So,
And my dog loves chasing those guys down the beach on.
and they love it. Yeah, like I say, not a lot of major changes in here, other than probably those few things.
You know, my sense is that this transition has gone extraordinarily well, and I thank you.
Thank you. And other than Joe and myself sort of moving positions, we did have a few other guys that left, and then those positions were filled fairly quickly with good quality people.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to say, because we all know what the market is out there.
Yes.
There's not a lot.
Yeah.
We feel lucky how things fell into place.
We had a meeting, council meeting last week, and I think only Kate and Paul were here. But I said to them after reading the town manager's report, and I mean it for everybody who's at this table, there is so much going on. It's all incredibly positive, and it's not like I've been here a long time, and I know Martha on and off has been for a long time, but it's really impressive the amount of work that's going on, and we really appreciate it. Understand how hard your work is, how hard you do work. So thank you.
That I
Away for a bunch of meetings, but where are we at on the 20 million from the state and the bigger project?
Good question.
If it's been covered in meetings,
No.
No.
We should, it's
update
important.
folks. So what happened was, all good intentions on this one, and we publicly announced it. The state also told us that they had, will be moving forward budgeting the funds. The actual highway facility, the 5 million, cannot come out of federal funds. That has to be out of the operating budget or the state budget. RIDOT did include the $5 million in their budget that they presented to the governor. Unfortunately, the $5 million did not, it was removed from the governor's proposed budget. So since that time, we have been working closely with our local representatives and also some other folks upstate. And just as of Friday, Mike and I met with both Representative Spears and Senator DeMauro, and we took them down to the highway facility and showed them around. And one of the first things Mike said, see the stone, the curbing that's
It's a picture worth 1,000 words.
yeah,
I'm
outside.
so glad they came to see it.
Yeah,
I
so
know, right?
he said, Mike said, that's holding up the wall. And they looked at me and looked at Mike, and they were, I think, skeptical on that statement. And then they walked outside and said, oh my God, it is holding up the wall. So then we took him inside. We said, look up, you can see daylight everywhere. So they we got a nice sense of what the building looks like. So they were going to bring that back. Whether or not it gets back in the governor's budget this year, I'm not sure. But I think having them come down and see it, our local representatives, I think we're good. We're still working very closely with RIDOT on it. And that RIDOT has told us that they had put in the budget, unfortunately. As you can see here, with budgeting here, and sometimes things get removed. But even though it was removed from this year, it has to be there next year. And I think we'll see what happens.
And then the 15 million.
The 15 million, they did have folks, VHB, which is an engineering company, did come out, that was hired by the state, that's going around to all state roads, and they did take a look at the state roads here. They came back with an estimate which was substantially higher than the 20 million. RIDOT said that they would like to possibly still do a couple of roads on the island, so that's what they're exploring doing. However, we'll see what happens there. I'm not sure if the two roads they're looking to do, the mobilization and demobilization of the location on the roads are not geographically in the same area. So we'll see what happens. Also, as the council all knows, I photocopied a letter that I sent to Director Alvedi regarding Corn Neck Road.
Spring Street.
On Spring Street. I'm sorry, on Spring Street, that's right, I'm sorry, I said Corn Neck. Corn Neck was in the 20 million. On Spring Street, we've seen some integrity of the road on both sides has been, in my mind, compromised. Jim Jeremiah, we showed on the picture, he penned the letter for me because obviously he has the engineer, civil engineer, he can pen the letter. RIDOT is on top of it. We sent it to the director, also to our local representatives, and I'm expecting to hear from RIDOT, if not this week, next week, because they were having meetings about that, and hopefully they'll come out and address that.
Mike, can I ask a follow-up to Neil's question and to Mary Ann's comment there? Do we have a sense of, okay, if it's not 20 million, if it's 10, of sort of where you would put that 10? You know what I mean? Like,
It's funny,
Because I
I was gonna sort of reiterate on that, and in our conversations, that's exactly what they asked me. They said, where would you prioritize this, Mike?
Okay, great.
And I was like,
Yeah.
one of 10 places, you know?
Yeah.
It was hard to pick a spot.
Sure.
I think the one I actually put as number one, not really necessarily a strong one, was down around Ocean Avenue, down around the intersection by Dead Eyes, primarily because it's our highest traffic road.
Right.
There's spots out on Coonimus that are worse.
Right.
Ocean, but it's off on the other side.
Sure.
Low traveled road.
Yeah.
So is that sort of balance of,
Yeah.
you know, what's priority, what's not?
Yeah.
And they got that sense, they understood that.
Right.
Just another thing that the folks at Mary Ann and I have been talking with at RIDOT, I got the sense that they truly felt bad that this fell through for the time being. So, and I got the impression that they were gonna do us right. We weren't quite sure how, but they were gonna do us right.
Then the bridge almost collapsed and.
Then they get distracted by somewhere else. Bridges.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, part of that too, you know, as far as prioritization, there's the conditions of the roads, conditions of the drainage, conditions of the guardrails.
Right.
So there's multiple different things that were all in that VHB engineering report that, you know, they highlighted. So it was quite a bit.
Great.
Mike, this is far afield. I probably should ask you offline someday, but do we have anywhere a record of when the state really did serious work on these roads?
I'm sure we do. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is by memory, but memory of folks that are still alive. And for the most part, it was in the 1970s. A good portion.
That was just paving. That wasn't fair enough.
Oh, right. That's just paving. But there was also the west side of the island didn't get done. So some of them are even older than the seventies from that time.
I think the west,
That's
the
incredible.
west side doesn't, John Wolf, senior used to have the road crew, told me that the Neck Road was the only one that had a real base on it. And that was the one that was torn up in the sixties. And in my lifetime, I mean, God knows what happened on the west side, but I think I would have known back then.
You don't drive.
No,
So far away.
it was,
She hasn't
No.
renewed her passport.
my mother used to say when she came to Block Island, the west side wasn't even tarred. It was still dirt, so there's no real, stone base under, I don't think there's any base under any of this, and I asked.
Over on the west side, if you see, whatever that last time was, I believe it was in the seventies, it might have been even before, the operations were run out of what used to be Joe Sprague's pit. They did all the roads to the right. If you can notice the change right by his spot, right by the driveway, everything to the east got done. They ran out of materials, nothing to the west ever got done. So that's where you'll see the transition in the road is right there.
The other was Steve.
A good example is that turn right by Dick Martin's house. That
Mhm.
road is horrendous right there, terrible shape. But everything to the right, it's not great. It's 50 some odd years old, but it's a better material.
And where are they?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No. It's all
But
all important.
I do think it's important because I talk about the small boat and people think I'm talking about the Manitou. I'm talking about the Sprig. And I realize nobody knows what I'm talking about. And I think, while you can collect whatever you can from, Adrian and folks like that, I think you've got it in your head, but stuff's got to be written down somewhere too.
I'm sure it is.
It's actually holding up the wall of the highway.
Yeah, it's in that rock.
Can I ask you a quick question about streetlights?
Yes.
So the street lighting, the budget hasn't really changed. Are the new streetlights on Weldon's Way, are those solar or are they?
They are solar.
So they don't factor into this? Right, because this is
I don't believe so. You might be able to correct me if I'm wrong.
Is this
I don't
line
think
an
it's in
electric?
that because those were primarily a test also. They were the first time the power company has used those solar lights. And that was like a perfect opportunity to do it.
They're fantastic. And they're really,
We've had some issues.
We've had some issues.
you don't like them?
No,
Oh, no, it's just a matter of
keeping them on.
keeping them on.
Oh, all right. I mean, I
They've had
know,
to tweak them quite a bit.
really?
And I believe the power company is gonna look into a different type because
Oh,
we
okay.
haven't gotten the best results.
Those are solar and they were tests and they tested them on Weldon's Way. So they were happy to give them to us to
Yeah.
test them. And
Got it.
so
It
that's
was
why
a great, yeah, it was a great opportunity to try.
finickiness with them.
I guess what I was really asking is this a power bill? This line item?
Tariffs for streetlights are a little bit different in that they're fixed per pole. And that tariff has not changed in quite some time, but I will go back and double check to see if the count has been adjusted. It could be that since they're maintaining them, they added them, but I don't know. I will get that answer.
There might be a few, but
I haven't.
a handful.
Yeah,
but
it wasn't
not
enough
many.
dollars to notice, but I will double check.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Oh, I don't even know what to tell you how long that is.
Harbors. So harbors, we're on page 16 and I get just before I turn it over to Kate. Three things that I will call your attention to. The first is line 7320, which is maintenance restrooms. We just recently got bids back and the council awarded the contracts for cleaning of those restrooms. And the increases vary depending on which spot we are talking about, but they were pretty material increases in those rates. Just that's why that line is going up significantly. The next one, line 7,500 is an increase of $20,000. That's, Kate, you can correct me, but I believe a trailer, which is too small for the capital budget. It fits into the operating budget. And I think we were planning to do that this year, but it has been deferred because of other priorities that came up. So we want to have that funding for next year. And then dredging, obviously, there's a big disconnect between the requested amount and the recommended amount, which is level funded. The timing of some of the work that hopefully can be done this spring may shift some expenses into the current year. The needs are large, and as I've spoken with some of you individually, the cost of permitting and engineering around dredging has changed, I think. And so how much we can actually do next year with 35 between Old Harbor and New Harbor, I think is an unknown. It's sort of the best I can offer at this time, but I'll let Kate add anything that she might be able to.
What's the priority, Kate?
It's becoming, it's not just a loss of revenue at this point, it's a navigation.
Right.
Getting in and out of the basin. So that would be my priority. We're looking to get that done by April 30th.
So it's a current year.
So it would be for this year. So I could use this monies for New Harbor in the fall. But the
Stuff that we've done is the actual channels. Or
for New Harbor or Old Harbor.
Old Harbor.
For Old Harbor, it will be the old bait dock along the Ballards side.
New Harbor.
New Harbor will be from Payne's Fuel Dock to almost Red Island.
That's getting shallow there.
Okay, I get it. I'm sorry, I ask this question every year. The maintenance dredging in Old Harbor is just the channel?
No,
What is it,
The-
please?
Army Corps manages the main channel of both.
Oh, yeah, I was only asking.
They do not come into the Old Harbor inner basin where I would consider is our rental area and where we make the money in the summertime. They did that in 2021 because they were already out here doing the whole Anchorage and the main channel of Old Harbor. And they were kind enough to put my project onto the contractor that was out here. And that's the last time that it has been done.
So they contracted out that time? When did they bring their dredge out last?
2021.
Okay, so that was their own dredge.
Was a company who did it on the Army Corps' behalf. Right?
I know,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Carrot and whatever the other one
The
is.
burden,
Sorry,
the burden.
thank you. I just feel like we ought to be able to get a little more dredging from them. I know you've
I
worked on
started
it.
this in August and I just got the extension for the emergency dredge last Monday. And they only gave us the window until April 30th.
Yeah.
So we're trying to run with it. to
Oh, I
get-
know, I understand that. I'm sort of looking downstream and it took quite a while to get them to do the maintenance dredging at all. I think that was before you were. here.
And they
It was quite
don't
a while ago.
consider what I want dredged in New Harbor to be an emergency either.
Yeah.
So that again has to come onto the town,
But doesn't all the fuel come in there?
not by boat anymore.
Well, that's, I'm not old.
I wish it still did, because then we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well, maybe we could figure something out there.
Anything else on harbors? Amy? Oh, sorry, Molly, I didn't
That's
see.
okay. I couldn't remember what my question was, but I had a question about the abandoned boat disposal. So we don't have anything is that just like on a case by case, like you don't budget for it, it just happens, or why is that 0 now?
I don't want to support that. We have policies in place that I will try and enforce even better.
So I guess I'm not asking, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is this because we're changing it so that you have to have
Yes.
insurance okay,
Yes.
terrific, thank you.
And the individual that did go down in this past fall had insurance. He's working with the insurance company and the vessel removal company before, I would hope within the next couple of weeks.
How much of your time has gone into this? It seems like there's been an awful lot. Okay, let's leave it at that.
Besides all the gossip. I would just want compliance and consistency for everyone. I'm just trying to make it fair.
Yes.
Keeping on these people, it just doesn't seem fair that
No, it doesn't.
they should be doing, working that way.
So also, so like this week, the abandoned vehicles that were left on the property down by Old Harbor.
Yep.
So those get disposed of, does that comes out of your budget, or is that out of the road crew budget, or where does that? Who gets the hit for that?
Not in the water.
It's not in the water, so it's not you. Okay, great.
I think that would be up
That's a
to-
great answer.
But that's something else that we're dealing with. And we have a whole row of bikes along the boat ramp that are gonna have to be picked up and thrown out.
I was going back to the highway barn, I think.
I was just gonna say that.
The ones that are on public property,
Yes.
I don't consider that public property.
Who's gonna take care of it?
Should be the property. Municipal bodies. Take care of their own house.
So I just throw them off to on the other side of the.
I think Mike just gave you a roadmap. Terrific. Anything else for Kate before we move on? Amy?
If there's nothing else there, then page 17, we have the building officials department. The one change there is a reduction in the consultant building official line. This might be sensitive for some people, given the conversation that we had at financial town meeting last year.
Yeah.
From a budgetary perspective, I feel really strongly about not over budgeting that line. And 108,000 is in excess of what we've ever spent. And I think it's reasonable and appropriate to stay at the $100,000 level based on our experience. So.
Fair enough. I mean, that of course begs the question, is it effective, right? And in a way, while it was a financial town meeting question regarding the budget, it was, to me, witnessing it, it was a feeling that among some contractors, clearly that it wasn't working. And are those conversations ongoing? Yeah, great.
Yeah, that was a transition time.
Yes, totally. Look, I think this is a model we have to, consider and make work where it can. It's just that, unlike you, people like me aren't. I don't have any idea how it works, and other than budgeting.
I think you're going to see that it is working.
Great.
And like I said, it was a transitional time. Contractors were getting used to things,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they're
Terrific.
used to it now.
Great.
Amy, I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate with you there. So given you're gonna talk about the substantial increase in permitting and dollars around it, you still stand by the budgeting? I mean, I heard Mike, but it's gonna sound counterintuitive when you start talking about it. You're gonna cut something, but we've seen exponential growth in the area.
It's a great
So-
question that I don't have a technical answer to,
Okay.
because you would expect that, but we're
Yeah.
not seeing it in the numbers on the building side. So I think the numbers I have are through February, but we're on the four-leaf expense, we're at about 52,000 through, and I think that's through January. So more than halfway through the year, you extrapolate
Yeah.
that. That's based on the activity we've seen. I do think where we've seen some of this pressure of that building and construction value activity is in the land use side, in the planning and the zoning
Right,
applications.
right.
I think that's where the complexity
Yeah.
has really been
Yeah.
falling on the staff.
Yeah.
And I think Jen will probably talk to that when we get there. So recreation,
Excellent.
I don't have too much to add, so I'm just gonna turn it right over to Dave.
I mean, I didn't go crazy with my budget again. The main increases that I look for really are kind of the way things are everywhere. I'm trying to make employee wages commensurate with the mainland so that we can attract, good candidates. I need to hire lifeguards. We need to hire camp counselors who take care of the kids. We need beach manager, we need things like that, and we have to be able to be competitive. And, in Rhode Island, there's a huge shortage of lifeguards, so it's hard enough to get people to come out to Block Island and, increase cost of living out here. So most of my increases in the budget were dealt with the increase in wages. There is an increase also trying to keep up with the reality of the cost of restroom maintenance for Ball O'Brien. We kept Ball O'Brien open through Thanksgiving.
Right, yeah.
We normally was closed, closed in September, then we were going to October. Now we went through November. There's an increase in the cost of
Sure.
keeping that open. So we want to kind of keep it more in line with reality. We want to budget for what reality is. Those are the big increases. There's an increase on vehicle maintenance only because we're going to be getting 2 new vehicles in the fall, 2 new vans from Department of Transportation that need to have maybe general regular maintenance. So there's an increase there of $1,500, $750 a vehicle for
Great.
general maintenance and things like that. The big things are, the wages for the town beach and wages for the summer camps.
If I can just sort of explain or contextualize the gap between the requested column and the recommended column, particularly on the town beach wages. That doesn't mean that Dave can't go out and hire the lifeguards he needs at the rate that he needs to pay them. What we're doing here is sort of hedging the reality of how long they can stay. Will they be available for the whole season? And that's more of a budgetary game than what we're willing to support
Right,
those
right,
employees.
right.
I budgeted for the entire season, the entire full staff. In reality, say many lifeguards have to leave for school. My staff, declines towards the end of the season. But you still have to kind of budget for
Sure.
the high end of it.
Right,
And,
right.
the reality of it is that we don't have a full staff towards the end of the season as everyone goes back to school.
Yeah, so he'll come out of the gate the way that hopefully he wants to be staffed. And I'm playing a little bit of a game that
Right.
it won't all make it all the way through.
They won't.
They won't. This year they will.
That's okay. And if they do, then that's a problem I'll have to deal with.
Right. Can I'm sorry to go back, Mike, but I'm curious. I know. Well, if you want to take over responsibilities for the bathrooms at Mansion Beach, are you anticipating a significant increase because of the new bathrooms at Mansion in terms of ongoing, emptying and all that?
Yes, I think there will be an increase in usage compared to the portage on it, because nobody likes to use portage on it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
We'll be using a nice facility now. I did have the conversation with Dylan,
Yeah,
just for, this reason, for budgeting purposes. And we went back and forth, and because it's all brand new, we don't have anything to show.
Sure,
We
yeah.
decided to keep it what it is. If it's different, it's not gonna be huge.
not material, it's,
Like
yeah.
these, the facilities, or the porta johns we had before, they were pumped 3 times a week. Whereas the new facility, we're not quite sure, it might be once a month. So,
Oof.
but it will be more material.
Sorry. Sorry.
So-
Oh, did I just say that?
So as those expenses roll through, we'll track them separately. So that we'll be able to build a budget
Sorry,
for
Dave.
next year, but we decided not to.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's just one of those I forgot to ask. Yeah, fair enough. Terrific. Thank you, Dave.
So if there's nothing else for Dave, library will be
So
discussing.
hold on one sec. Pickleball and the grant.
I knew it. I knew we would go there.
I have not heard word back. They did ask for some clarifications last week as far as they wanted a clarification on the exact, if it was just gonna be a concrete slab or if it's gonna be painted with lines and permanent poles and things like that. And accessibility questions, which I did answer them. So they've obviously been reading the grant, but they haven't come back with nothing definitive yet. But
Do they have a deadline to approve everything in that bucket or?
I'm not sure. It's kind of a roll. I think it's kind of a rolling thing, but the good news is they did contact for some
Yeah, right.
clarity. So
Yeah,
we'll see where that goes from there.
yeah.
Yeah, those grants usually, because they repeat every year, those are usually, we hear by usually mid-April, mid second to third week in April. So I think in the next few weeks we'll.
Amy?
Well, we'll discuss library tomorrow.
Yes.
So we're on page 20, which is GIS and technology. Where there's really some shifting. I think from a program standpoint, we're really seeing an increase in the last line there, license and maintenance contracts. As more and more departments use more and more online tools to
Sure.
streamline their processes.
Mhm.
And that's great. And it's helping on clerical time. It's helping on how money flows. You know, it's trying to reduce some of those touch points. It does mean that we're investing more in those software packages. Most of them are software subscriptions. So those numbers are going up. At the same time, we're seeing fewer expenditures in the consultant technology, so I think we can safely bring that budget line item down. There is still money associated or costs associated with special projects. So when one of those systems is deployed for the first time,
Mhm.
there are often implementation costs, and we try to build those in where possible. But I'm fairly comfortable with this budget, as well as, again, some prior year technology dollars that we're still holding on to that we can tap into to finish some of those deployments as needed.
Gotcha.
So, anything you would add to that, Marianne?
The only thing I would add, especially with the equipment replacement, we've made significant gains in that area in recent years. So I'm really pleased. The technologies company is really pleased, and we're finally in a cycle of replacing as needed instead of having a whole mess of them that we need to replace.
You don't have a closet full of mag tapes anymore?
No, but I still have the picture.
Just astounding.
I was astounded, yeah.
So on page 21, we have boards and commissions. And before I turn it over to Jen, just some highlights first on the North Light, who did put in 2 requests that were not fully supported. Not because they shouldn't be, but we have to balance budget, and that's one of the things we're struggling with, as well as the timing of the projects that they have upcoming. And so the likelihood of certain maintenance elements, given the construction schedule, things like that.
Right.
But they had increased, asked for an increase in wages. We settled on a recommendation of 20,000. And then on the maintenance side, a recommendation of 15,000. So that's where we are with North Light. And then there were 2 additional requests from land use. One was to increase the current clerk hours from 35 to 40 hours, and that was recommended, so that's put forward. There was a second request to add a new additional part-time clerk, and that wasn't currently included. One of the elements that we'll get to on the revenue side is whether or not a short-term rental ordinance is passed. If it does, what that looks like and what the fees associated with it are. In the budget that we have in front of us today, that is not contemplated either on the cost side or on the revenue side. So
Right.
as the conversation evolves, that
Sure.
may need to change.
Sure.
But that was part of the context of that decision today.
Right. But it does bear, perhaps, not perhaps, it does bear at some point because of you made the point about the building official. At some point, we've got to figure out, and other than making this assertion, it's outside of my area of expertise, but we got to figure out what the ideal staffing model is for that, given that the essential part of the rationale for some of the stuff we're doing in this budget is the dramatic increase in construction activity and construction value. That doesn't happen without people on the hamster wheel trying to pump this stuff out. So probably at some point we'll talk about that, figure it out with.
Jen, I don't know if you want to contextualize that now or if you have anything to add.
I don't really have anything to add. The only thing that I was concerned about was the recorder, line 5,500 recorder zoning board. I proposed an increase of $2,000, which it could be more because the zoning board and the planning board are having different functions now.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So we have public hearings before the planning board that we don't usually have the recorder stenographer. You might see an increase there.
Great.
but we
Yeah.
don't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hadn't really thought about that. I think we're likely to see over the next year some potential changes or at least reallocation, because planning all of a sudden exactly. Yeah.
So
It's going to be interesting to see how that all works.
The stenographer, we're communicating about planning and zoning and trying to determine which meeting she needs to attend, so. She will be at a few planning board meetings in the near future.
So you think the ideal staffing model there, to Amy's earlier point, is to bump the current part-time person up to a full-time,
So that's an increase of 15 hours.
right? And have a second person who could do short-term rental and,
Just to
yeah, right,
in the office.
right.
But primarily, if short-term
Sure.
license.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Additional staff.
Of
We need
course, yeah.
15 hours.
Anyway, yes,
that's
yes,
So
yeah.
With that.
No, it's really helpful clarification, but, and I think, at least from my perspective, that's where, if that passes, that's where that money should go.
I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of changes.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Do you see a lot of promise in the online stuff? We were talking about the soft. Yeah,
I didn't like it at first.
yeah,
I like it now.
yes.
Now I'm used to it.
Yeah.
So it's changed. It's the same thing. It was.
My favorite
a
say,
transition period.
everybody loves progress, everybody hates change.
It's really useful and
Yeah.
I think the contractors are all used
Right.
to it and we can bump it around to the different departments.
Right.
and I think it's gonna be great for short-term rental licenses. That's what you.
Yeah.
You adopt that.
Great, that's very helpful. Any
We have
questions?
seen a number of new 513s in the last few months.
Hot dog,
That's good.
that's great stuff.
Yeah, there is one thing, and having been on some of these boards, well, Keith, you have, that I think tends to get overlooked by people. And that is the you know, I consider just a bear of a job writing minutes. Even if you have a recorder, even if you have the stenographer, there is still this business of keeping records, and it's the same thing with the clerk's office, that I just don't feel as if everybody really understands how much time has to go into
True.
that. And I know Tristan, you
So
probably
true,
do.
yeah.
But he's not even listening to me. But I do feel that sometimes people will say, oh, they only work. I say, no, they work. There's a lot of work you don't see that goes on with all of these clerical positions. Because at least with the police, you're out there on the street, and Mike, you know, and Mike and Tom, you have things, and Dave, things that people see. People see the harbors in action. And it's sort of like this, oh, the clerical, that's just clerical. And there's so much more, and the absolute importance of maintaining the record of the town. And
One-
Amy, I just looked over you, didn't I?
100%. I agree with that 100%. And the thing that we have to keep in mind, and this is not necessarily apropos of anybody's particular duties now, but the direction the state statute is moving in. And I assume it wouldn't surprise me if this was part of their rationale, is this is pushing us toward a much more hierarchical structure, and sort of the new state law demands a lot out of those departments, regardless of town. That was one of the things that struck me when we were voting on that stuff. You can't underestimate that. And maybe it's because, as you say, Martha, you and I were on zoning, so we know just what goes into preparing for a damn zoning meeting, so it's just an area that we have to figure out, and in some ways we're being driven there by legislation.
And there's 5 boards in that department right now, in my department, and then there's gonna be another one.
Well, HDC doesn't meet very often, so.
Right, they never. We love
It's true.
Yes.
Yes.
Do.
Yes.
Yes. Almost all boards meet every-
Martha and I have been talking about this week. I'm just teasing, but thank you. Thank you, Jen.
So it's funny you say that, Margaret.
Come up, Julie, come up and, because otherwise, so you think it's because we care about the record? In fact, what we care about is we each get 10 texts saying, we can't hear what she's saying.
All right, am I good now? Can you hear me now? I think you're going to see AI products that are coming out. They're going to be very, very helpful because they have them now from doctors' medical notes. So you can, you see the patient and then you talk and you do a dictaphone and then you put it on an AI thing and it crafts it into medical, like legit medical notes. So I think if you can stay on the board long enough, you're going to see that. But you can see, yeah, because the clinical, the clerical end for someone like Jen or that land use is heavy, so.
A lot of it has to do, that's when the stenographer comes in, what has to be.
Right.
Exact wording.
Exactly, right. Yeah, exactly, right. So that's, I think there's going to be products like that for this kind of thing.
Neil is actually going to be replaced by an AI.
Exactly, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, but it would just be a real time saver. So I think you might see that.
Thank you. Amy? Thank you, Jen.
Do people have some energy for revenue?
I definitely, I think it would be a mistake to go through this meeting and not talk about revenue. And I think we have to talk about it's what the focus will be appropriately. And so, yes, please.
Are you starting?
Yeah.
Yes, and we'll talk about taxes in 2 sentences. Let me get through 2 sentences first, which is the sort of the story of revenues in the 25 budget is essentially all about taxes. Because when you look at most of the other revenue line items in this budget and try to see where there is space to fund the needs that the departments just described, just about every other line item that currently exists is maxed out. We had two areas, and we'll go through the detail of each revenue department, but there are really two areas that increased. One is building permit fees, where we were able to increase that revenue line item. The other is the state road agreement, where Marianne and Mike have been working with DOT on the next round of that 10-year agreement. And they've proposed an increase in the rate. Beyond those two, there are no material changes in any of the other revenue line items that the town's looking at. And so short of pursuing brand new revenue streams or pursuing areas that might be a little more tenuous, one of the ones we talked about was the landing fee. You know, that's a touchy one to tackle. And so short of new ideas and some pretty challenging hurdles, there aren't great places to draw on to meet the town's needs. And so what this budget looks at is tax-based funding for these programs. There is a proposed increase of 17.9%. Before we break that down into its components, I want to translate it into dollars so that there's a sense of scale. And this information is on page 3 of the narrative. That 17.9%, if you're looking at a valuation of $1 million house, the average valuation by parcel on the island right now is $997,000, which is actually a little lower than I thought it was, but that's what it is. So $1 million valuation at our current mill rate has a tax bill of $4,816. With the full 17.9% increase, we're talking about an increase of about $864 annually, so that we can have some context for that number.
I don't know whether this is the right time. Oh, sorry.
No, no,
I don't know whether this is the right time to say it, but I think it's really important that we go forth and work on options for homestead exemption. I know at a recent meeting, we talked about working over the next year that was unburdened by actual knowledge of this budget. And that's, I think it's really important from the taxpayer's perspective for taxpayers to understand that on the one hand, there's nothing in here that's a nice to have, that'd be nice to have. They're all sort of real things that we need, but they also, I think, need to know that we are working as hard as we can to mitigate the impact of these kinds of investments. So, if you want to work together on that or whatever, but I just think it's important to do and to be serious about considering that as part of this package. That's just me.
I think we're going to come back to a lot of these ideas throughout our discussion. So I'm going to leave that on the table for the moment.
Sure.
And
I just didn't want to forget to say it.
continue down the path. And we can come back to it. Do you have a question?
Oh, I did. So you said the average home is assessed at $997 and that their taxes were $4,816 on average. And then you said 800. Does that include the 800 or it will be 800 more than that?
800 more.
Less. Okay, thank you.
So Marianne introduced the budget with the framework of the, don't forget the 80%.
I did this.
Is this at 80?
That's 100.
Good, thanks.
Marianne introduced the framework of the 4% cap. And so there's a pretty big space between 4%, even if you maxed all of that out, and 17.9. And so what we've presented here are really three pathways of that tax levy. The first two we're pretty familiar with, the space that we get from 4%. And so for us that this year, that's about $500,000. Which at the end of the day, doesn't go super far. There's a chart on page 3, and I'm talking about the blue box here, that breaks out some of the elements of where that 4% has been distributed in the budget in front of us. That includes support for the Block Island School. It includes some of those benefit changes that we've talked about. It includes compensation for employees that is obviously still subject to negotiation. It includes that first year of the Human Services Department. And that's about all we could fit. And so.
What is non-capital debt service?
And so when we talk about the second column, I'll answer that. When we talk about the second column, and the broadband debt service that came online in fiscal year 25, that's an allowable override. That's something the town has used fairly frequently in the last 15 years. Because it's one of the only ways that we can use to fund major capital projects. So we've done a lot of debt service overrides for major capital. The way the math works on that exemption under state law is that you have to eat the first 4% under your 4% cap.
Oh, I see.
You
Gotcha.
are only exempt for the amount above 4%.
Gotcha.
So
That's
we have
really
to fit
helpful.
the 4% in our 4% dollars.
Yep.
And then we're only allowed an override if the state approves and the
For
voters
the
approve
96.
on the differential amount.
Yep.
And so for us, that's $695,000. That makes sense?
Yes. Yep.
The state make it easy.
So those are two things that we're familiar with, right? The third category starts to get to addressing those growth pressures and the public safety needs and the climate adaptation that we've talked about in this budget, that we've been feeling around the community, and think that this could be a strategy for meeting those needs in a more innovative way. One of the things that the state does allow as an exemption for the cap is when a community recognizes substantial growth. And this is written for the mainland, so they need, when somebody puts in a new subdivision, then you can go for an exemption for the cap to cover those infrastructure costs. That doesn't happen out here. Like, we can't just add a new subdivision. But we've been feeling and seeing pretty significant growth in the last few years. And for the first time, we can actually capture that in some of the data. And this is in the building permit and construction value numbers. And I know I'm jumping around in the narrative, but on page 4, if you're a visual person, you'll see a chart. Historically, construction value, meaning the value of the building permits that are pulled every year, has been in the 19 million a year. And it was in that space for a long time. In 2021, there was a big jump. From 2020 to 2021, the construction value jumped about 25%. And one of the contexts for that at the time was, okay, we had a huge number of property transfers during COVID, and a lot of those people tore down the house, did a major renovation, increased the footprint, they're higher end homes. It made sense. And so we sort of waited and said, okay, let's see what that looks like. In 2022, there was a 5% increase. Okay, is that just the tail end of that COVID renovation? We'll wait and see. Let's try to figure out what we're dealing with in terms of trends. From 2022 to 2023, we had a 40% increase in construction value. So construction value went from 23 million to 32 million. One of the other big changes wasn't just this 40% increase, it's that it was also a major shift from residential to commercial. So in 2022, 18% of the construction value was commercial. In 2023, 30% of the building value was commercial. It's been continuing into 2024. So we've only got 2.5 months of data for 2024, but last year at this time, building permit revenue was about $15,000 for January and February. This year for January and February, we're at $87,000 for building permit revenue. We've already hit construction value of over 11 million. and about 35% of that has been commercial. And so that pressure that we're feeling of things constantly continuing is finally being manifested in the numbers. And it's this huge increase in valuation in construction work, in the type of work that's being done, and a shift from residential to commercial in the last couple of years, which adds a different kind of burden to not just the services within town hall, but then meeting those needs out in the world, whether it's police, fire, health services, road pressures, transfer station, trash, all those things. And so why am I giving all this data? Because this is the kind of data that the state uses in order to evaluate a request to go over the cap. So if we decided as a community that we want to continue to expand our services, to try to operate at a higher level, and to fund those priorities that we're hearing, this is a strategy that could be possible because we now fit into the state's framework and can demonstrate meaningful growth that really demonstrates the pressures that have been felt out here. I'm going to pause for a second to make sure everybody's still with me. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So having demonstrated that we can meet some of those state criteria, we think it's still an application process.
Well, just to make it clear for people on the phone or that are listening, back to your 4%. So the 500 basically is all block and tackle, you gotta do it. So it leaves no money to do anything else for the town, which roughly. Maybe I'm overestimating it,
I
but
would say it very much covers the conversations we had today, the departmental operations, yes. Yeah. Which means it doesn't capture any of the capital needs. And I'm not talking big capital, school, fire station, I'm talking daily capital. In terms of, I'm really gonna break it down to the 3 categories. Public safety needs, climate adaptation needs, and then sort of growth pressures that we're feeling. And so when we talk tomorrow in detail about the capital budget, you'll see that the recommended capital budget is about 1.3 million. It starts to address some of those things that we have been continually putting off. And in the light of the Harborside fire, in the light of some of our police changes over recent years, do we continue to put these things off? Or do we take an opportunity that currently exists to fit into that exemption category and sort of bite the bullet and tackle them? So on page 3, in that 3rd column, you can see we've broken out some of those public safety priorities, which is the first half of a saltwater pump for fire protection downtown. We were fortunate to be able to use one during the Harborside fire, and the department has requested one of our own. This would be a 2-year deployment. The second item involves renovations to the dispatch area, making sure that is secure and modern might be overstating. Fundamental might be a better word. Much needed either way and continually put off. And not something that can necessarily wait much longer. And then the third would be bringing online that communications individual, as well as the head end resources that go with it. The second category of things to tackle deals with the pressures we're feeling with more frequent storms, the damage that they do, and the inability to get ahead of some of these more urgent climate needs. Dredging becomes a great example, where you can't seem to stay ahead of it. The permitting side gets more complex and therefore more expensive. The constraints that we're working under are intense in terms of regulations, and then getting people to do the work and being able to foot those costs. Another example would be shoreline access, we have a grant into DEM for improvements at Grace's Cove, which would improve access with a walkway and hopefully stabilize any erosion in that area. So it's a sort of a two-angled deal. Securing the North Light is in that category as well. We are constantly fighting a battle to keep that building ahead of the elements. And the need, again, to take a major step forward in that project is continually sort of put off. We put a little bit of money each year, but we haven't been able to take the major steps we need to make sure we don't lose that building. The final one on that list is the Old Harbor Bulkhead. And again, it's a 2-year project, but the idea here, for anyone who's not familiar, is to reinforce a section of the Old Harbor dock that allows us to bring barges and materials directly into the town dock and offload. It's done now with some reaching, but it would allow direct offload. And so this is the first year that would be engineering and permitting, with construction to come in the second year.
It's the south dock.
On the south dock. The third category there is really the growth burden and some of the other areas in the budget where the pressures of all of these people, of their expectations, of what they think the service levels should be, and how we accommodate those needs in terms of the transfer station, which needs another review in terms of the facilities, both the physical assets and then its operations. And then support for the health services and fire and rescue. And again, the volumes that they're feeling and will describe for us a little bit more tomorrow night. So I know that's a lot, but that third category is really one of the first opportunities that the town has had, if we want to pursue it, to take major steps to address those pressures that we haven't been able to tackle in other budget years. And we fit at the moment into some exemption categories that the state has. So Marian, is there anything you would add to that or that I missed?
I just want to suggest something, because we have a meeting tomorrow. That was a really cogent description. I think it would be worthwhile to do that tomorrow first, because I think we undoubtedly lost people tonight. So if you don't mind doing it again, I think it would be worthwhile to do that off the top.
I think we should. Do you want?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But I was just thinking about tonight where, you know.
We also have some people here.
Mhm.
And Amy and I have lived this now for a couple of weeks, so for us. it's
Right.
second nature.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
Therefore, sometimes we don't realize.
This also questions now.
All of the materials are on ClerkBase. If you are numbers inclined, even if you're words inclined, I think there is a lot more material there that's probably laid out more clearly than I've articulated it tonight. And so if you have a chance to read it on your own and come back with questions or areas that I didn't flesh out, let's talk about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is I think if you go over this again tomorrow, that gives anyone who's listening at home tonight the opportunity to come to the meeting tomorrow with questions, because I think people are gonna have a lot of questions about this, and I think we're gonna have questions.
Mhm.
So, and I think if anybody's listening to the meeting, we're gonna get a lot of phone calls tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said the retirement was 92, it's 93% funded. That's what I get for showing up. I would just say this is an extraordinarily well put together document.
Great.
Really, really found very helpful. Can we put on bulletin board that it's on ClerkBase? I mean, I just think something that is this well done, really should get as much exposures.
Yeah, I'm gonna put something on Facebook also this Friday, more so about the public hearing, which is coming up with the dates, and then we can put a link to put page for the documents.
I think the more we distribute this, the better.
Is it hard to put right on the town webpage?
That's what we'll do. And same thing on Facebook page, it'll be a hyperlink to Clerk Base, which will bring them to the budget.
So very easy on that.
It's a
I think
hyperlink.
he's suggesting right on the homepage.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. David. David.
And we'll get it on the block.
David Lewis.
Okay. Hi, David.
Just a second, a suggestion with regard to user friendliness to your reading population that you just were speaking to. The sequence in ClerkPace, I have no idea how that
noticed
sequence
that,
is
yeah.
assembled, but the first 3 pages are the capital budget. The second is the document which Amy just went over, which is where you're really trying to get focused. So maybe you can, I don't know how you want to present it, but it's a little bit offsetting it because I was expecting Amy's document to be first.
You expect
And
the
I'm
narrative
among the
perspective.
more initiated, just
It's a good point. It's a really good.
make it easy to find.
Yes.
Thank you.
I didn't realize.
Hey, Amy, do you want me to tell that guy to sit down?
It's really good.
Yes. Anything else, Amy, or are we?
We do need to go through revenues,
Yes.
but I think this is a great place to pause for tonight.
Right.
And we'll get back to this
Terrific.
at a different day.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, everybody. Motion to adjourn. Second, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thank you, guys.